Just some good news about the Messenger Hope Mission podcast. We are on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Spotify, and soon to be YouTube Podcast. Check us out, follow us, and share us with your friends.
You're listening to the Messengers of Hope Mission podcast with your host, Bob Gardner.
Interested in cryptocurrency? You probably have already heard of Bitcoin. Hex cryptocurrency is like Bitcoin, but better. Hex is decentralized. You can lock up Hex for a fixed period of time to receive awards, just like a certificate of deposit at your bank. This yields averages far more than what traditional banks offer. The rewards are paid from inflation. No one owes anybody anything, and there are no middlemen in Hex. In Hex, you're the bank. The more you learn about Hex, the more you'll love it. Buying Hex cryptocurrency is as complex as setting up an email account. To find out more, go to hex.com.
Hey everyone, this is Bob here with Messengers of Hope, and I want to wish you a happy March. As you might have realized, there was no podcast last week, and I'll get into that a little bit. There was no podcast last week because I was super busy working on writing what I'm going to dub as micro grants. Now, in my mind, micro grants are different than regular grants. Regular grants can be any amount, and I'm going to say anything over $5,000 can be a regular grant. Anything $5,000 or below is what I'm going to call a micro grant. I don't think that's the actual term for it, but because I don't know what the actual term is, that is what I'm going to call it. Another difference between micro grants and regular grants is micro grants are much easier to write. It's usually just a quick letter or filling out a quick form and sending that off versus a grant where you have to actually write a letter of intent, get invited to the grant, and then do all the writing for it, explaining what you want to use it for, how you're going to use it, the demographics of who you work with, and then, of course, you got to give presentations. And the better the presentation, the likelihood of a better grant. So they're very different. So for the sake of this podcast, I will call them micro grants versus regular grants. And last week, I spent time writing micro grants, which I did a total of 18 of them. Now, that might sound impressive because I said micro grants are anything 5,000 or below. Typically, in the past, we have gotten, 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 micro grants in a year, and that can be anywhere between $250 up to $5,000. And last year, we got a total of about, we got about $1,500 in micro grants. Part of that is because of the post-COVID world. There seems to be less grants going around, and of course, the need is higher for not just Messenger of Hope, but a lot of other organizations as well. So as I said, I wrote 18 micro grants, and the average of those was about $2,500 per grant. Now, so far, out of those 18, we've gotten 1 rejection so far, and the other 17 are still up in the air. And, that's kind of what I expect. You kind of hope that you'll get a few of the grants in, but you want to write as many as you can, because if you don't write them, you obviously won't get any grant. And of course, Messenger of Hope does need the money, so that's why we write these grants. Each grant takes me about a half an hour to an hour to write, so I was quite busy last week doing that. I will say I did a couple of them the week before, the Friday before, so not everything was physically last week, but a total of 18 in all. Now, as I said, 1 was already rejected. The other ones we're waiting for. Some are through a portal online that we can see how quickly it gets accepted or rejected. Some are, 16 of them are pending through that portal. 1 is something that we're just waiting for in a letter form. Whenever we get it in the mail is when we get it. Typically that one, I think, is sometime mid-June or July, if I remember correctly. Last year we didn't get it because there was no money in that particular grant funding. This year, however, I'm hoping that we hit it early enough that we will be able to get into that grant funding. We have gotten it in the past, and I'm, hopeful that we can do that again this year. The other 17 are through one company. Now, the reason that there's 17 is you can actually write for each of the different locations of that company. And just for the sake of it, I'm not going to share the name of these companies that are doing this because I don't want to have anything negative if we get rejected for them, because it's not the company's fault. It's just a matter of there's not enough funding to go around. But one company we wrote a total of 17 grants for, and it, on average took about took about a half hour to an hour to write each of those grants, and it just took time. I'm able to look at a portal on that and see whether or not we get accepted, if it's pending, if it's rejected, if it's accepted. And so far, 16 of the 17 are pending still, and one has been rejected. Now, the reason that one was rejected is because it's kind of outside of our area that we work in. And that's understandable because this company looks for organizations that work within their area. We're just kind of right on the border of that. We kind of work in that area and kind of not. It's like a gray area for us, but I figured as long as I was writing them, I was going to write that one as well and hope for the best. And, it didn't work out this time, but you never know. So that's why I wrote it. And on top of that, my better half had her week off last week, so I tried to spend as much time as I could with her, not working. I did have to work a little bit, obviously, writing the grants, and of course, with my window washing company, I had to work with that a little bit. But for the most part, I outside of that, I spent time with her, and we just enjoyed a nice, quiet week. Except for when our plumbing burst in a wall and we had to get a plumber here to fix that. I was able to turn off the water within seconds of it happening, but the water went through the wall and was going all over the place. And then, of course, we had to get a restoration company to come out and do the cleanup and then the carpet cleaning. It was a big mess that took about 4 or 5 days to get done. So we had that going on during her week off, which was not a great thing, but at the same token, we were home. This could have happened when we weren't home, and it could have been far, far, far worse. So I'm kind of thankful for the fact that I was home, even though it kind of ruined at least a little bit her week off and my time off with her. But last week was also the week that I was going to talk about what we did at the food pantry stops on the weekend before. And I can only talk about the ones that happened on Sunday because that's the only ones I remember off the top of my head, and I don't have my notes here to look up the other ones. But I will tell you that the Sunday ones, the ones that I directly run, that I supervise, those were, the first one was a little bit down due to the rain. We were about 2/3 of what we normally have. And that one's kind of hard to call. It's in Odessa, and I never know how many people we're going to have showing up because it's only been going on Sundays for about 3 or 4 months now. So we haven't quite gotten into the rhythm yet of how many people are going to be there on what particular week, but we still had about 35 show up, which is, like I said, slightly down. But hey, it's growing, word is getting out, and I got to say that it's great seeing these people. They come in and they're just so thankful for the food that we give them, and all the volunteers that were there, I'm appreciative of them and taking care of that, really helping me to make sure that all these people get their food, not only shelf-stable food, but refrigerated food, frozen food, and drinks. And then what we had was our big pantry, which is in Newport Richey, on Sunday afternoons. And that one went really well. We had over 180 people in line representing, well over 800 people, family-wise. We kind of keep tabs of how many people that represents. So we really did a lot on that particular day. Now, we had some bad news. So the place that we meet on the first and third Sunday in Newport Richey, we can no longer meet there. There's a new business there, and they do not want us on their property anymore. So I'm going to be looking for a new place to go. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move down the parking lot into an abandoned bank parking lot for this upcoming weekend. But after that, I've really got to find a permanent location. And right now, we're meeting somewhere around the Ridge Road and Congress Road location. And we want to stay in that area because there's a lot of low-income housing around there. There's actually some Section 8 housing. And, of course, people know we're over there, so we want to make sure that we are in that general area. A lot of people that come to our pantry on Sunday have to walk because they do not have vehicles, so we don't want to go too far from that spot. So that is something that I'm going to be working on here over the next couple weeks, trying to find a permanent location for us to go. Unfortunately, the parking lot that we're in, the owner of it that invited us to use that parking lot, he sold the place last June, and the company that bought it has just opened their store there. And, I can't blame them for not wanting us there. We fill up the entire parking lot. There's a liability issue. I'm sure that they're thinking about that as well. But it's a great location, and I'm really going to lament the fact that we don't have that location anymore. But outside of that, it was a good day. Like I said, we were able to serve over 180 people in line, including some people that worked at that store that were working there, low income. They came out. There was one lady that came out, and she was just in tears. She hugged just about everybody, every one of the volunteers, including some of the people that were in line for food. She was hugging them. She was so emotional and overjoyed by the fact that she was able to get food for her family. And I hope that she is able to come even when we move. Another reason why I want to keep in that area, because a lot of those employees at that store need what we give out as well. So, man, I don't really want to lose that area that we're in. And that was kind of last week. This week, today is Tuesday, so we have a busy week starting already. Yesterday, I started writing grants that are big grants, not the micro grants, but the bigger grants. And like I said, these are over $5,000. Now, that doesn't mean that we are going to get over $5,000 or anything at all. We could be granted less than $5,000. It's just that we're able to write for more than $5,000. And as I've said in other podcasts, I am not a grant writer. This is something that I've been doing for, I think, 7-8 years now. And it is not my forte. I am flying by the seat of my pants. I'm guessing a lot of times on what I have to put in there. And sometimes I get the stuff back saying, you need to finish this and you got to do this. And, this wasn't the best way it was worded. And, I get a lot of feedback. Sometimes I get the feedback after the grant is over. But I have to do it because I don't have anybody else that can do it, that has the experience to do it. So this week I started writing for those. Now those, I was writing letters of intent. And basically the letter of intent says, I want to write a grant to this organization, this community, this government organization, whatever the case may be, and I'm going to ask for this amount. And then they have to look at it. They have a review committee that looks at it, and then basically they will send back an invitation if you're allowed to write that grant. The letter of intent part is probably the easiest part. It took about an hour each to write. And like I said, I wrote 3 of them. They're all to the same organization, but they are for 3 different programs that we run. And I don't want to talk about those right now because one of these programs is something new, and I don't want to tip my hat and possibly have someone else write a grant for the same thing. I'm hoping that this will be something that will really set us apart from other organizations. But at the same token, it's just something that we have to hope that the grant committee will accept and say, hey, that's a really cool idea and we want to give you a grant for it. So that's a new one that we're doing this year. The other two, actually the other one of the other two, we write every year, and we've gotten anywhere between $2,500 up to $15,000 or excuse me, $25,000. But we haven't seen that type of money since pre-COVID, again, because grants are not available like they were before COVID. So we're kind of struggling on the grant side of things, getting the money in, but we're hoping that this year we can really, really put some polish on our grant. I want to do some stuff like video and a little bit more presentation side of what we do with Messengers of Hope and highlight the bus, and hope that that will tug on the heartstrings of the grant committee. But that is all up in the air. And, if you're a praying person, please pray for this because, we need these grants. These grants are very important to us. We could get grants that could fund us for, half a year if we're able to get it. If we got all the grants that I wrote, all of the micro grants and regular grants, if we got them in the full amount, we'd have enough to cover an entire year of what we need. And then, we could actually expand what we're doing and help more people. So I sent in those 3 letters of intent, and it'll take another week or 2 before they're ready to start reviewing them. I think they start reviewing on the 22nd of March. And then who knows how long it'll be before they finish all the reviewing, because it's not just Messengers of Hope. There's literally hundreds of organizations that send in grant letter of intent for the grants each and every year. And so the committee has to really search through it, sift through it, and decide who's worthy to be invited for a grant. And then even when you're invited to write the grant, there's no guarantee that you're going to get anything. They just sift it down from there. So you get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that send in letters of intent, and then you have a few hundred that get invited to the grant, and then about half or a third of those actually are able to get a grant, and you don't know how much you're asking. So for the sake of argument, let's make it easy and say I asked for $10,000 for grant A. Well, it has to go through the grant committee. The grant committee has to decide, okay, we're going to let him write a letter for Messengers of Hope, or a grant for Messengers of Hope, rather, and we're going to have him give a presentation, and we're going to listen to him. We're going to ask all these questions. We're going to look over his documents. We're going to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, and we're even going to check those lowercase j's to make sure they're dotted. And then, once all of that is done, then they convene after meeting with every organization they met with. And let's say they had $100,000 they had to divvy up. Well, they have to go, okay, what category does this fit into, and how much of that $100,000 fits into that category? So they might say, well, only $30,000 of this fits into this category, the category of feeding people, like Messenger of Hope does. So, and we have 10 different organizations asking for $10,000. How are we going to break this up? Well, they might say only 5 of those organizations are going to get that. And even though you ask for $10,000, you get $2,000 because we're going to split that between those organizations, or however the math works out. I lost what I was saying and how much there was. But you understand that that money has to be split up multiple times before an organization like Messengers of Hope gets it. And that is what I have really been working on, and I'm trying to hone those skills. I'm trying to read everything I can about grant writing. I've been watching videos on grant writing, and let me tell you, it's kind of confusing. And unless you've been trained in this, I'm not sure that it's really something that the average person can do, or maybe I'm just that dumb and I just can't get it. But anyway, I had to do that this week, and this is the stressful time of year for me for over the next few months, because I'm going to be continuing to write these things. And then so the letter of intent took me about an hour for each one. So that was 3 hours. Now the grant writing itself, going to be looking at 25 to 40 hours each one. So it's a full work week on each one of them. And typically by the time you get invited to the time you have to do it, you probably have a month and a half. So I've got to fit all 3 of those, if we get invited to them, into that month and a half. So I'm hoping that we get invited for all 3 of them. We'll see. Time will tell. I'm looking at the time on this podcast, and I've already been talking for over 15 minutes on the main portion of the podcast, and I didn't even talk about anything that I wanted to talk about today because I have grant writing on the brain. And, that I guess, you know what? I didn't do a podcast last week, so hopefully I can get a second one in this week, and I talk about the things that I really wanted to talk about later this week. But, I had to hunt down these rabbits today that are running through my head and talk about what is on my mind. The one thing I do want to talk about that I want to say in this podcast, and if I am able to do a second one, I will bring up as well. This month, we're going to be starting a new Messengers of Hope food distribution stop, and this is going to be in Lutz on County Line Road at North Tampa Church of Christ from 1 to 2:30 p.m. on the 3rd Thursday of every month. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be a new area. We have not been over in Central Pasco, at least not that far into Central Pasco ever. So we're looking forward to that, and we know that there are some low-income areas around there. There's a lot of need, so we're looking to get over there and meet the needs of people. And frankly, the people at North Tampa Church of Christ, they have been amazing. They are supporters of Messenger of Hope, and we thank them so much for this. And I'm looking forward to partnering with them even further by having a food pantry right on their property. The bus will be there, making it super easy for us to come and set up, and I look forward to that so much. I'll be at the first few just to get things started, and then we'll pick somebody. I think we already have somebody in mind that will be running this pantry on a regular basis, and I'll be there just from time to time after that. But that'll be on the 3rd Thursday of every month. Well, that is going to do it for today's podcast, and you know what? As I'm thinking about it, I definitely will try to get a second episode in this week, because this is episode 10 and this should have come out last week. It should be episode 11 by this point, but I want to keep up with that. I want to keep getting the podcasts out. And I also want to thank our sponsor again. This is Hex.com, which is like a Bitcoin currency, except it's better. You might have listened to the sponsorship at the beginning of the podcast, and please do if you haven't done that, because the owners of Hex are great people, and they've supported Messenger of Hope well before the podcast, and I really want to thank them. I have Hexcoin as well, and I really want to encourage you, check it out. If nothing else, go and download the app, learn a little bit about it, and then decide from there. So I want to thank Hex.com and the family that runs that, and all the people that are working on that really hard, and they are the sponsor of this week's podcast episode, so thank you, Hex.com. Check in later this week for the next episode of the Messenger of Hope Mission podcast, the one that should be coming out today, but I'm behind. So forgive me on that, and just understand, even though the water happened, all the pipe bursting happened, I still had a good time off with my better half. Thanks for listening, guys. Catch you later. I'd like to take a minute or two to talk about some of the needs that we at Messengers of Hope have. And if you've been listening to the podcast, some of the needs you'll have heard before, such as we need chest freezers. We need a lot of them. We need at least 3 or 4 more. We just got one recently, thanks to Steve and Sally Wallace, donating one in honor of Sally's sister who recently passed away. And we're very grateful for that. But that being said, we still need more freezers. We could use, like I said, 3 or 4 more. And the reason for that is because we get a lot of frozen food in, and we have a high turnover with frozen food. But oftentimes we'll get stuff from the stores much more than we are capable of holding. And what we've done in the past is we've given it to other pantries. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that we can do that. But that puts us a little bit behind the 8 ball when that happens, because then we're giving away the food that we could be giving away to people, and we're giving it to other pantries. Often that happens because we just don't have the room for it, not because we don't have the need for the food. Keeping in mind with chest freezers, I do want to say the other thing that, if you've been listening to the podcast I've been talking about, is we want a walk-in freezer. We want one that is big enough so that we can put shelves in it and store things in it that way. One of that has a door big enough that we can roll a pallet jack right through and roll it into the freezer itself. If you've been listening to the podcast, you probably heard me talk about that, and I said, it's better than keeping it outside, especially in the summer months. Well, I've had questions on what I meant by that. Well, that simply means when we get the food and we bring it in, when it's really hot outside, it takes us some time to get it into the freezers. So that means that the food is out in the elements, or at least inside the building, where it is hot until we get it in. Now, we get it in the freezer within 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how much we have. But if we had a walk-in freezer, we could roll it right in and then sort it right in the freezer and make sure that everything stays cold the entire time. Please understand, when I say this, I'm not saying the food is going bad, but we want to make sure that we take every precaution and keep the food as cold as possible so that nothing ever happens. And I want to talk about our pipe dreams some more. So one of our pipe dreams is to have a forklift. That is something that we really need because our shelves go 12 foot in the air, and right now we're having to hand load everything off of ladders. So one person on the floor, one person on the ladder, one person up on the shelf, and it takes quite a bit of time to do that. If we had a forklift, we could load everything onto a pallet, shrink wrap it, and put it up top in a matter of just seconds versus 45 minutes to an hour of taking it up there, and it's also a lot safer. Now, we have someone that thinks that they might be able to help us to get a forklift, but that still is kind of a long shot. So if you're a praying person, keep that in prayer, or if you have the ability to get us a forklift, we'll be happy to take that as well. And now for the big pipe dream that I want to talk about is we have been talking about potentially having a thrift store. Now, this is not something that anything is set in stone right now. It is just in the thought phases right now, the dreaming phase, if you will. And it's something that we would love to do, but the problem is that would take money to be able to set up, and we're already at the point where we're always right on the cusp of having enough, because it takes a lot to run Messengers of Hope and because of everything getting more expensive. We do have periodic garage sales, which do help. However, if we had a thrift store, we could just cancel all the garage sales and go to a thrift store method and have a constant source of income. But this is a pipe dream, something that we're talking about. But if this is something that you have experience in or are able to help us, please contact us. We're willing to listen and talk through ideas. Well, that is some of the Messenger Hope needs for this week. Be sure to listen in on this part of the show every week, because it could change. It could be adding things, or it could be taking things away that we've gotten, and we will share it right here. Okay, everyone, this is the point of the podcast where I get to make an appeal to you, the listener. Messengers of Hope is in need of volunteers to come help work at our warehouse. We have jobs as easy as sorting food and toiletries, items like light cleaning, all the way up to lifting and stacking of boxes. If you live in the greater Tampa Bay area and want to serve with Messengers of Hope, reach out today. Go to our Facebook page and message us directly. If you're not local or do not have the ability to volunteer at Messengers of Hope Warehouse, you can still make an impact. Messengers of Hope is in need of financial gifts. Donations are tax deductible, as Messengers of Hope is a registered 501c3 nonprofit. You can go to our Facebook page and find an online donation portal or get the address and mail us a check. Any amount helps more than you may think. That's going to do it for this week's Messengers of Hope Mission podcast. In the words of Mother Teresa, if you can't feed 100 people, feed just one. This is Bob Gardner reminding you to make a difference in our world today. See you next time right here on the Messengers of Hope Mission podcast.